He didn't find his dreams. His dreams found him. Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. Seeing as how I've recently found and purchased and showcased the VHS, the original North American VHS release for this film, I thought it only made sense to stop on by and do a movie review of the film. Also, it's really kind of cool how it just coincidentally happens to be the 40th anniversary of this film. Stopping on by today to come your way to review the now 40-year-old film by the name of The Last Starfighter. Da 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 da. That's Naked Gun music. Anyway, admittedly, I'm not very familiar with this movie. I saw the VHS cover, all the way back into the 80s and the 90s. The VHS cover, it was always a title that I was familiar with in the 80s and the 90s and beyond, but for some reason, the title seemed kind of pansy to me, like The Last Starfighter, oh boy. And I just never bothered with it until, I don't know when the hell it was, years and years ago, maybe the early 2000s or something, I did end up coming across the DVD, watched it. I don't think I thought too terribly much of it when I saw it. Then the years later, I ended up coming across the clearance $3 Blu-ray. It was the MCA home video, universal, horribly noise reduction Blu-ray of Last Starfighter, which I recently, after I saw, found this VHS, it made me want to watch it. And Beth had never seen The Last Starfighter, so I'm like, well, let's watch the horribly, noise reduction, all smeary ass original Universal Blu-ray release, and Beth's never seen it. I need to familiarize myself with it because I thought, well, as long as I'm showcasing the VHS, I might as well then review the movie. And I gotta say, I liked it a lot more having just revisited it, even with that smeary ass Blu-ray. And I know that Arrow Video has put out a much better Blu-ray, and it does make me kind of want to, if I could get it for like $20, maybe I should get up on that, because I really kind of, the Universal Blu-ray is really kind of crappy, and I really kind of enjoyed it this time out. Obviously, I grew up with Halloween and Halloween 2, and Lance Guest, even his little part in Halloween 2, the original Halloween 2, like, I always kind of liked him as that character of Jimmy, kind of the young, idealistic little guy who worked at the hospital. I always liked his character in Halloween 2, and it's funny how we never necessarily knew if he ended up dying or not. If you look at that deleted scene where he pops up at the very end in the ambulance with Laurie, he doesn't die, but in the the theatrical version as it is, we don't know if that character dies or not. Not a really big deal, but what I'm trying to say is, I did like Lance Guest in Halloween 2, and of course he's in Jaws: The Revenge and stuff. I actually like Lance Guest, and honestly, after seeing this, it does kind of make me want to seek out other movies he may have done in the 80s and things, because he's a kind of a really cool actor, and just really embodied that 80s thing, just that Kirk Cameron kind of 80s thing going on. And obviously the girl who plays his girlfriend is like really kind of attractive and got just one of those just like perfect. It's really strange how some women have like almost what you could almost describe as like a masculine kind of face, where it's just kind of all like chiseled and all this and that and stuff, but talk about a really sexy, cute-ass face she's got. And we do see her, I think, once towards the beginning of the movie in shorts and stuff. So it is, she's all around really relatively attractive. But I thought she was kind of this, perfectly cast. I mean, the Lance Guest and that chick are like really perfectly cast in this movie. Oh, I can't let this review go by without mentioning that the original Michael Myers from the very first, or I guess The Shape, from the original Halloween from 1978, none other than Nick Castle directed this movie, The Last Starfighter, which is kind of interesting if you happen to be a Halloween fan. When we were recently revisiting this movie and watching the very beginning where they're all getting ready to go to the lake, and the main sexy chick's got an authentic 80s igloo cooler thing, I'm like, oh wow, we have one of those. But I think what she's got is a bigger one. The one we've got is called an igloo little playmate, but this is like the same kind of from the same era as the igloo cooler she's got. This is just a small version called little playmate, which is kind of interesting. This one was apparently big enough for us in the 80s. Like, how much stuff do you really need at the end of the day anyway? And this particular thing, as you can see, it's igloo. This particular thing opens like this. You push this button on the side, and this comes down like that to open like that. Pretty cool. Just a little bit of a side note there. It's really got a kind of a cool sound when you shut it. Very, very recognizable. So yeah, The Shape himself directed this movie, and pretty good job he did of it, honestly. It opens with just this trailer park, which has got a really, really cool kind of a, is it Starlight Trailer Park or something? But it's got this like iconic sign, which honestly I didn't do any digging or anything, but I wouldn't be surprised if some, you know, like just some toy manufacturer, some high-end, like, you know, whatever kind of manufacturer of nostalgia kind of things actually made like a reproduction, like a small, like 12-inch high reproduction of the sign, the Starlight Trailer Park, if that's what it's called, sign, just where it's really kind of a big part of, honestly, the first quarter or first third of the movie. The drive-in, or not the drive, I always want to say drive-in. I think there's like a Starlight drive-in or something, but Starlight Trailer Park, just the environment and the just that sign and that little diner or whatever, that restaurant, is like such a really kind of cool and cozy aspect of this movie. And I should probably mention that I spent a little bit of my youth growing up or living in a trailer park. So the trailer park in this movie is, it's, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like it's not like, it's just, it's some trailers just clumped together. Like it's like, it seems more manufactured for the movie than anything. Like I lived in a real trailer park. So, you know, that trailer park aspect of this movie is obviously a little more, I guess, kind of relatable to me or whatever, having spent some years of my youth, you know, living and, you know, in a trailer, at a trailer park. And I gotta tell you, on a side note, like I've said it before, I think, that it's a perfect, you know, I mean, I know the you know, the whatever that's attached to like a trailer park and trailer trash and stuff, but honestly, growing up, you know, being a kid living in a trailer park, and it's really a great place to grow up because you can ride your bike around the trail. It's like your own little city, and you know, you kind of stay in the trailer park now, and it's like, you know all these kids in the trailer park, and it's its own little kind of a city. So I'm actually, you know, I kind of look back fondly, believe it or not, on my trailer park years as a kid, just running around at night, playing ninjas during the summer at night, and laser tag and all kinds of stuff. So the aspect of this movie where like the main stars live in this, like, you know, kind of quaint, cozy trailer park is actually kind of cool. Lance Guest plays this one, you know, nerd. I don't know if he's a computer nerd, video game nerd, who has high hopes to you know, avoid going to city college like all of his other friends and stuff, and girlfriend or whatever. And he's gonna, I can't remember exactly where he sent away to apply for or something, but alas, he gets the disappointing letter that he doesn't get in, and he's just relegated to, what is his whole future? Just relegated to living in this trailer park and fixing people's electricity and clogged toilets and stuff. Kind of like an underdog story, of course, like so many of these stories. Like, you know, obviously Star Wars episode 4, you know, A New Hope, same kind of thing, where he's kind of like this Luke Skywalker who's just not very happy about his life and his future prospects and things, even though he's got like the sexiest girlfriend alive. He should maybe be a little more appreciative maybe of that. He seems to be just like, take her for granted, honestly, just like, you know, just like, just moping around and this kind of stuff. But the thing I think is really kind of cool about this movie, and it's really strange how, like, when I first saw it on DVD in the early 2000s or whenever I first saw it, like, it's really strange. I don't know, maybe that was during my depressed period. There was a period there where, you know, after 2010ish, 2011, 12, like I think like 2010 through like 2014, 15, I was like just really kind of more or less depressed. And if I saw it for the first time during that period, I can understand, you know, just being like, humbug or whatever. But not being as depressed these days, like seeing it again, and it was really kind of cool. And I guess it didn't hurt that in the last year or so I've kind of gotten back into like, like video games, like retro video games from the 80s, and we found it arcade, and you may have seen some of them videos of us playing games at the arcade, and got some, retro video game toys and this and that in the last year and stuff. So I've kind of gotten like 80s retro video game charged in the last year or so. So that probably helped me appreciate this movie as well. And honestly, I think the premise of this movie is really kind of a cool premise, which actually takes the video game arcade aspect that was still kind of new in 1984. I mean, arcades and video games were still relatively new in 1984. It takes that the rise of the popularity of video games and video game arcades and says, well, okay, let's make up this video game for this movie and call it it's called Starfighter, I think. The video game is called Starfighter, possibly. It's a fake made-up game for this movie in which Lance Guest pretty much, he can't get very far from the trailer park because he's always doing repairs and this and that. Why is he the guy responsible for repairs? I'm not exactly sure if we know why. But regardless, he's responsible for the repairs, and his only bit of refuge that he seems to be able to get is to play the Starfighter game, and one night he plays it so well that he gets the all-time high score, and it's so funny how all the trailer park people come up and celebrate him, and the one guy from that Mr. Sims from Silent Night, Deadly Night is like one of the kind of extras. I mean, for a while there he didn't have a line, but then at the very end, like I think in his last time he appeared in the movie, like he did actually have a line at some point, and he's like, oh, at least they gave him a line. But Mr. Sims, he's one of the trailer folk in this movie, which is kind of funny. But it's right around the time. Is this before? This might. Yeah, I think this. I don't know. It's right around the time of Silent Night, Deadly Night. But this guy Lance Guest character beats the all-time high score, and everyone kind of like with Tron, and Jeff Bridges, Flynn, how he gets a high score in Space Paranoids, and everyone rallies around him, and it's just like the biggest deal in the world when he gets it. It's like, yay, and all this and that. So it's a big deal, whoop-de-doo, he gets the high score, he sits down with his gorgeous ass, sexy ass girlfriend. Like I say, he seems so unappreciative of his super sexy, frickin' girlfriend, like moping around and stuff. But alas, not long later, is it that night or the next night or something, a car drives up and he's like, we're looking for the guy who beat the got the high score on Starfighter, and he gets in the car, and basically what ends up happening is that he's ended up that video game was supposed to go to Vegas, but can't remember why it didn't go to Vegas. It ended up just being plopped at that frickin' trailer park or whatever. But the whole premise was that video game was from another planet. And forgive me, I'm not going to know all these details, and then the galaxy they're from, or the planet they're from, or any of that crap, or the name of the enemy, or even the name of the good guys. But the video game was placed there by some other planet, alien civilization, to test humans on Earth, to basically recruit pilots for a real intergalactic. And if I get these details wrong, forgive me. Unfortunately, I didn't grow up with this movie, and it would have actually been cool to have grown up with this movie, but alas I didn't. I mean, you can't grow up with every single movie ever made, honestly, at the end of the day. And like I say, I think even as a kid seeing this cover in the video store and seeing PG rating and stuff, I was just like, it just seemed too pansy for me. So, that's why I probably didn't see it until when I did. But that's the premise of this movie, and because this guy got the highest score presumably on the planet Earth, they basically more or less this aliens more or less abduct him to go just put him in the training for this real fight in the intergalactic battle with whatever this and that. And one thing I do want to mention is, just like was so often is the case with Tron, also with Space Paranoids and some of the games, I think mainly Space Paranoids that were featured in the gameplay in the movie Tron. It's so funny how like the video game play, and same with the Starfighter video game, in the movie is like way more advanced than video games were at the time, because it's like actual computer generated effects for the games. And little did we know that it'd take, like, I don't know, maybe another 10 or 15 years for video games to actually end up looking like that. But I always wondered what kids thought. I was too young, I wasn't really paying attention at the time, but what kids thought at the time of, like, how come these video games look so awesome in the movies, but that's not how they really are, you know what I'm saying? Because they actually used the same computer generated effects that they used to, you know, throughout the movie to do the video games. You see what I'm saying? So that's just a side note. But as long as I'm on that plot point, I think one thing that kind of put me off the first time I saw it to this movie is the use of very primitive CG, you know, computer generated effects to basically you take the place of actual, or supposed to represent actual physical ships and you know, space station, you know, basically spaceships and all that kind of stuff. And unlike Tron, you know, the computer generated effects that were used in Tron were used absolutely 100% perfectly, because of their antiquated appearance at the time, just the beginning of computer generated effects. Like, it was limited, and even they knew what they could do was limited. So I mean, you're not gonna try to make a dinosaur, a realistic, that's supposed to be a real dinosaur with computer effects back then. So what they were genius about with Tron is they're like, okay, well, what can we do with CGI? Well, what if CGI effects basically represent the inside of, you know, a computer? And that was absolutely perfect for what, you know, the limitations of the computer generated effects at the time. And this is like 2 years after Tron, and it's like, God, I don't know if I necessarily agree with, like, actually using CG to represent actual spaceships and try to recreate actual physics and this and that. And honestly, that's one of the things that, I mean, I think 40 years on, you can start to look at it at this point of being like nostalgic and kind of like, you know, like, ooh, look at, you know, I don't know, it's kind of hard to not watch those scenes with the computer generated spaceships as they're supposed to be real. Like, let's face it, the ships in Star Wars, the 3 Star Wars movies that existed when this movie came out, looked a lot better than the CG generated ships in this movie. So I mean, that's like something that's really going against this movie in the special effects arena. On the other hand, it's like it's really strange, because like the ships don't look anywhere as good as the 3 Star Wars movies that exist at the time, or Star Trek movies or anything. But at the same time, like, the CG in the movie is cutting edge for the time. So it's like this two-sided swords kind of a situation where it's like, oh wow, it's like quote unquote cutting edge CG, but at the same time it's like, well, it ain't quite cutting it, if you know what I mean. But I guess one of my problems with the movie is just like using relatively antiquated CG, maybe a little too early to represent actual physical things like spaceships and starfighters and all this kind of stuff. Some things like that little, I don't know what it is that they're like, there's something where it's just like a bracket of all kind of alien things, if they're space mines or whatever the hell they are. Like, some things work, you know, fine, or this or that, and you know, I think they spend a lot more time on the actual starfighter thing, maybe a little more detailed than the car that was used to hijack them and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'm bitching about this way too much, but if you didn't know, like, there's some early computer generated effects that are utilized to represent, basically, instead of doing miniatures for the spaceship stuff, they just did all the spaceship stuff and all that kind of space battle stuff with computer generated effects, which, you know, 30 or 40 years on doesn't really hold up. But I mean, it's a part of, I guess, the charm of watching this movie now, I guess. I mean, I almost wouldn't necessarily be against them updating the visual effects, honestly, to, you know, make them look actually decent. Just, you know, to have like the ultimate, you know, Blu-ray or 4K release of original version, and also kind of like what they did with the Star Trek, the original series, where they redid all the visual effects, but you can also watch the original if you want. I think it'd be really kind of a cool exercise to just redo all the visual effects in this movie. I think it'd be a really, I don't know, better movie, honestly. But, you know, there's probably a lot of people that grew up with this movie. Maybe people watching this review are like, you know, that's what that's what computer generated effects were in 1984. So, you, I think they looked at, you know, I was a probably some people watching this video, and I was a kid watching this in the theater, and I thought it looked amazing, and I can totally see that, and that's why, in a way, I wish I had grown up with this. I wish I had seen it in the theater, but I didn't. I did see Labyrinth. I'm pretty sure I saw Labyrinth in the theater, and there's like that. Is there a computer generated bird or something in the beginning credits or something? And I can remember knowing some. I don't know how I knew it at that age, but I like knew it was computer generated, and I don't know what I thought of it or whatever. But I'm just sitting here thinking that even if I had seen this in the theater, I probably kind of still would have thought the CG computer generated stuff is still kind of half-assed. But I spent way too much time talking about that. But that's the premise of this movie. It's really kind of a cool premise. And I don't want to forget to mention another aspect, which I think is almost more entertaining than the actual, battling the space bad guys, is the really cool plot point of when they basically kidnap the Lance Guest character. They leave like a robotic duplicate. I'm pretty sure, if I'm understanding correctly, like when he shakes hands with the duplicate robot, maybe at that point the robot, is able to duplicate him or something. Maybe physical contact is needed to duplicate the person. But I think honestly one of the most interesting and entertaining aspects of this movie is the fact that so the character, the Lance Guest character, when they kidnap him to go to whatever galaxy to fight the space battle, so people don't miss him on Earth, he's replaced by a robotic kind of boring, version, clone of himself. And that is actually really almost maybe the most entertaining aspect about this movie, and the hijinks and the comedy that comes from that situation, and him, taking his head off, and the little brother like seeing, his older brother, with his head off, and his head's on the desk, and all this and that, and the date, when the actual Lance Guest comes back, I think she slaps him because of what the drone said to, the drone doesn't like the sexual advances of the girlfriend, and that she sticks her tongue in his ear. Incidentally, like, the girlfriend at the beginning of the movie kind of seems innocent and stuff, and when we find out that, like, when they go to the lake, when like these 3 or 4 couples go to the lake, they're not all like playing volleyball. It seems like they pair. Well, later on in the movie, we find out that they may very well pair off into their own little couples and just set up a campfire at each of their little locations and get in the sleeping bag and have sex. Like, they seem so like innocent at the beginning of the movie, and then later on we find out, God, are all these kids having sex? Which is of course awesome, fine with me or whatever, especially if you've got a girlfriend that looks like that. But the fact that I can't imagine that the robot ever actually engaged in intercourse with her, because it always does make you wonder. We can only assume he's anatomically correct, but anyway, so in case I don't get too much off on a tangent, I will simply say that aspect of leaving the clone of the character, the more boring kind of just robot clone of the character, behind to fill the space for the kidnapped guy to go off and fight the space battles, is probably one of the most entertaining and creative aspects of this movie, honestly. And the one shot of like when he's still forming his face or whatever, and he's under the blanket, and we see like a shot of like, I can't remember if the little brother pulls the blanket off. I think possibly the little brother pulls the blanket off and sees like that fake head. It kind of reminds you of an Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but it's a much better, more sophisticated version. Like just seeing because the face is still like forming or whatever, and it's an actual practical, practical kind of fake head effect where the skin is doing this and the eyes are all bulgy. And I can remember thinking, God, that was probably that image probably scared a lot of kids. It almost scared me when I saw it recently, but probably scared a lot of kids back in the day, taking little kids to see this movie. And it's always kind of a bummer that they got to put that scary. I think they do that on purpose. It's a kids movie, but we'll put like some of the scariest images in the kids movie, like that ghost at the beginning of Ghostbusters. That scared me. I saw Ghostbusters originally in the theater, and 40 years ago, and that part scared me as what the hell would I have been, 7 years old. So So yeah, I think in closing, that's probably one of my favorite parts of the movie is just that goofy clone and the comedy and the levity that comes from, you know, leaving that clone behind of the character and all the this and that happens with that and stuff. That's kind of funny. And then when the Lance Guest character gets home, he has a conversation with the clone and all. I can't remember the ins and outs of everything that, you know, the comedic elements with the clone, but those are some of my favorite aspects of the movie, not even necessarily the evil bad guy and the space battles, because as I said, like, I'm kind of more or less not crazy about like the visual spec effects for the space battles and stuff. One thing I do think that I really would have liked as a kid is like just they show like the inner workings of like they call the starship something. I can't remember what they call the actual fighter ship. It's like I can't remember what it's called, but the actual, you know, we'll call it because I can't remember what it's really called. We'll call it a starfighter. But like I think the main, oh god, I didn't even mention the guy who played Conal Cochran in Halloween 3, Dan O'Herlihy or O'Herlihy is I don't know why, you know, he was probably pretty old at this time and they made him wear all this head covering makeup. Oh my god, like why did they have to do that? But he plays like the guy who trains Lance Guest's character, and I think if I'm understanding correctly, he like flies the ship and Lance Guest is the gunner. But what I was trying to get at is it's really cool how they do flesh out the inner workings of the spaceship. We'll just call it the Starfighter because I can't remember what it's really called. And you know how they flesh out the inner workings of how that works and how the one guy flies presumably and Lance Guest is the gunner and stuff. That kind of stuff is cool. And I don't want to forget to mention the music is really kind of cool and iconic and stuff. So and obviously, I mean, I think I can safely say he saves the day, and there's kind of a sequel set up. And honestly, it's a little bit of a bummer that there wasn't. I mean, this movie I can only assume didn't obviously perform well enough to warrant a sequel. It's kind of a bummer that there wasn't a sequel, honestly. But I mean, if you've got a movie called The Last something, I mean, how do you do a sequel? Like the second? Oh, just kidding. He wasn't the last. He was the second to the last Starfighter or something. But yeah, but I think it is at the same time. It is kind of cool when there's movies like these that are really kind of cool in their own right, and they weren't successful enough for a sequel or any other movies to follow. So it's its own little thing, kind of like Halloween. In a lot of cases, I wish that Halloween hadn't have been successful. I mean, it still would have been what it is, but it hadn't have been so successful. Then you'd only have just the first Halloween, which in a way is just perfect because just the way it ends, where Michael Myers just or the shape, whatever you want to call him, disappears. And just like we see all those locations and hear the breathing and then just cut to black. Like, I mean, how cool would it have been, as much as I like some of the sequels and stuff, how cool would it have been in an alternate universe to have just a Halloween and that's it? And that's, it made its money back, but wasn't successful enough to warrant any sequels. And so we just have one movie called Halloween that exists and no sequels. And so it is kind of cool when a movie like this, which is agreeably pretty iconic and really pretty cool, didn't do enough business to warrant a sequel, and it's its own little movie. It's just one and done, and that I think that's kind of special too. I can go as high as 3 stars out of 4 stars for The Last Starfighter. I don't know what the hell my problem is when I first saw it on DVD. But having revisited it recently again, I mean, it was really fun. I guess it's because, probably doesn't hurt. It's 40 years old and represents a really kind of a cool time in my, just 1984, mid-80s, just the good old days, if you will. I mean, I guess there was bad stuff going on in my life at the time. So, or was this before the divorce? I can't. No, I think the divorce was like 85 or 86ish. So. Yeah, the 80s wasn't all freaking sun and roses and cherries and strawberries or whatever for me, but I really wouldn't be opposed. And what's so funny is a lot of people could probably do this themselves on their home computer. And maybe if I looked on YouTube, some people probably already did some visual effects realization, fix the visual effects of a scene or maybe a shot from this movie or something. It'd be really cool, honestly, if they would have put it out theatrically this year to celebrate the 40th anniversary with redone visual effects. I really, obviously there's some probably Last Starfighter purists that would hate that, and that's very understandable. I can understand that. You know, tinkering with something from, 40 years ago, something from your childhood and in your youth that you regard as perfectly fine the way it is. But I'm not saying erase, George Lucas erased the original. I'm just saying, update the effects so we can see what the hell it'd look like with, actual decent visual effects. And by all means, definitely keep the original version, but just give people the option. It'd be interesting to experience this movie with actual decent visual space effects or whatever. So I guess that pretty much does it for my review. Probably ended up being a lot longer than I intended, but that can happen with me if you've seen some of my videos. So definitely appreciate you guys stopping on by to watch the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, we'll catch you on the next video.
We got a new game. Oh, no way! We got a new game. I'm gonna get grass. I'm gonna get my butt kicked. Oh, jeez.